Welcome to Unfinished Business. This is the podcast where we have real conversations with business owners about the lessons they have learned or the tips they've uncovered in building a successful business. Today's guest has 35 years of experience in marketing, but I don't want that number to fool you because he's not coasting on his legacy. He actually blew up the traditional agency model and rebuilt it from scratch around a single idea, which was if he could give every client exactly the right talent exactly when they needed it with zero waste, what would that look like? So Chris is the president and co-founder of Model B and co-owner of the AI media platform Blueprint Tech. Chris Perkins, welcome to Unfinished Business. I'm very excited to learn from you today.
Thanks, Kimberly. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, take me back to the beginning. What were you doing before Model B existed?
So I'm largely grown up in the big agency business. I was very lucky to be a part of Ogilvy as a young ad guy, and went through their account executive training program, and then actually was trained as a trainer. And so I did training in not a lot of the international markets. I ran an office in Warsaw, Poland, and lots
Wow.
of great experiences along those fronts. And then even I was on the client side a couple times, and I've used big holding companies, and that gave me a very clear view to how resources are applied, how the economics work. And as an agency guy, one of the things that we're always telling clients is that they should be thinking about the ways they should evolve their business model, the way that they should work smarter. And yet agencies, especially the big holding companies, for years didn't really take their own advice. And so kind of leading up to Model B, I saw it as an opportunity to kind of think differently and act differently. And so that's exactly what we've done.
So did you always know back then that you wanted to do something of your own, or did you just see a need and you started having ideas?
Well, this is the second time I've led an agency I've had kind of operating control over. Kind of the light bulb went off for me when I was at Hal Riney and Partners, and we were acquired by Publicis, and I was running the HP personal assistant group globally through the Publicis network. The light bulb went off for me when the client said, "Look, let's have a global planning session, and I want to bring your team and our team together. We're going to meet in Ireland. We're going to meet in Kinsale, Ireland, lovely place, by the way,
Not
and
a
we're
bad
going to."
gig.
I know, right? And we're going to spend, 5 full days working on the next year's plan. And, what's that look like? So the approach there, she said, "I'm going to bring 25 people." And I was like, what does that is this a working session, or is this an actual kind of chemistry and team building kind of session? She said, "No, we need to leave at the end of the week with an active plan that we roll out and execute." I said, "Well, if you're going to bring that many people, we're going to have to lock them out of the room because you just can't get, I mean, these things are not built through a democratic, kind of large team system." And so working with her, we brought 6 people plus myself, and she ended up bringing like 6 or 7 people. We did close the door, locked the door, and got it done. And then we went and did regional kind of presentations to the regional centers, both our team and hers. And then we were able to execute very seamlessly. And so what that taught me was, even big global programs are architect, the kind of framework and scaffolding for them are built by a very small subset of the team. And then if you're smart, you take the nuances that the individual teams, regionally and throughout the world bring to it to make it better, more locally relevant, more powerful. And so we've taken that kind of approach really in what we've built at Model B.
Yeah. Can you go into a little bit more depth? So, you took that experience from, working with a smaller group. What problem does Model B solve that that you took away from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, no client today calls and says, "I've got extra money and I'm happy to pay you whatever it takes to get the best talent and get the best impact." Right. So it's quite the inverse. It's, I've got flat budgets if they're lucky, and my team is shrinking, and I'm under all this pressure to deliver more value as a contribution to sales success for the organization. So how can you help me? So what agencies today need to deliver are like obsessive objectivity, right? Because as an outsider looking in, we can never truly know the business better than a client knows it, but we can know it from the consumer's view better than the client knows it. And I think that distinction is really important. So we bring that to the table. We also bring access to talent in a way that is really, really precise. So our partner collective has 70 plus agencies in it. So we can, you're paying for our organization. We're 8 people. And we're the architects of the framework. We establish what we believe those fundamental areas of important focus are. Then we pull in the experts. They're vetted, they're papered, they're ready to go. They cost nothing until deployed
Hmm.
and approved by the client. So access to extremely high performance talent, and everybody in our collective, one of the rules that we have is you have to declare your superpowers. So Kimberly, if you were in the group, I would say, what are your superpowers as an organization? And you can't have more than 3. Why? Because nobody really does. Like, honestly, my joke is that a hybrid bike is neither great at off-road or on-road, right? It's okay at both. So what you get a lot of times when you use services that are not the core belief and kind of focus area for an organization is just that. You get hybrid output. It's kind of a strong C or maybe a B if you're lucky. And so don't you want an A every time?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the methodology and the approach. And because we've got a global platform and everybody's in there, we can search by superpower. Again, everybody's already papered and we have operating agreements to execute very quickly and efficiently. So our general hypothesis is, how do you bring precision and friction reduction to every action that you do? And our methodology, we think, does that.
So I'm curious, kind of a personal question going back to the frame that you just laid out. If your goal is to bring, in your opinion, an agency's goal is to bring extreme objectivity, and you've cultivated a group of superpowers that could be deployed. What is your superpower?
Great
Why do they
question.
trust Chris?
Yeah. So we have 2 superpowers. The first superpower is that we take a management consulting approach to understanding a client's business, how they make money. We literally do what we call an ecosystem map. And that ecosystem map is a visual map that lays out what are the functional departments and structures internally, where people are deployed and resources are deployed. What are all those forces for good and evil externally? So what's their partner ecosystem? What's their, like, if they make things, what do they get raw materials for it? How do they ship it? Is it 1 or 2 or 3-step distribution? Are they reliant on partners for sale, or is it direct? What are all those things? And then what are the consumer universe look like? So that's all mapped out. Why? Because with that, we can step back and say, what are the things you're doing that are marketing and marketing adjacent actions and expenditures of money and time that are not performing like they used to? So how do we slowly replace them with something that's going to work better? What's the fundamental stuff that, the foundational program that you need to make sure you're doing exceedingly well and that analytics is telling the truth about? And then what's your test and learn? So we break it down into what we call a success plan. It has those 3 components of, so our management consulting approach gets us to that success plan of what to stop doing, what to continue because it's fundamental, and what's your test and learn agenda. And then we pull in the partners from the collective to actually make sure we haven't made anything up, to make sure that we're doing what we said we would do in terms of outcomes. And we call it a success plan. Why? Because if we can get clients to say, yes, those are the things I'm trying to achieve, and we're obsessively focused on delivering those things, you don't get fired, right? We're winning together, and we give them an actionable, clear path to success and something they can merchandise with leadership across the organization.
So take me back. This model is very interesting. When you were getting started, one of the things that I hear a lot of businesses that are brand new, more on the startups, is they don't have the case studies, if you will, to prove that this is a successful model. So I'm curious. It sounds like you had a very global database to pull from, which is always where we're going to start with our own personal networks, right? But how were you first finding your clients and relationships, and how receptive to this model were they when you started first presenting this idea?
I mean, it's definitely new and different, right? So it takes a minute for people to understand it. But anybody that's a seasoned marketer can recognize the issues that it's overcoming. So then it just comes down to trust and confidence and willingness to try it. And frankly, when you go to an integrated agency that's got all the resources under one roof, or you do a roster of multiple agencies by discipline, which, by the way, refereeing that is a lot. whereas we act as a general contractor. So we manage that resource on their behalf with full transparency. So if they want to intercede in any stage or level, they can and should. But clients, we guide them through it. And again, the transparency, we never white label anybody. It's all out in the open. We're very clear about it. But our hypothesis of precision and friction reduction is actually compounded by the cost efficiency. So, with most agency retainers, you're paying for all the overhead of the organization. And if you have multiple agencies and you're managing, a roster, you're paying for duplication of services across them, right? Because there's some layer, project management and account leadership, and even some degree strategy and planning that is now duplicated by a skill set. No way you're getting cost efficiency out of that. So what do they care about? They care about, accuracy, precision, cost efficiency. In a way, go back to the beginning of this. Nobody's got more money than they had before. They have fewer people on their team typically. They're under more pressure. So this solves for that full spectrum there. And the only thing they have to do is try it. And we're, very often, because of our model, we can also do projects. And oftentimes we do kind of a project as a starting place. I mean, just in February, we signed a financial services client that was a 3-month initial contract, and we just renewed for an extended period after they've seen the value of it.
Yeah.
So it just depends. I mean, some people get it instantly. Some people, there's definitely, it's not right for everybody because they just don't, they want to work differently, or they want a big global agency that's got all the in-house resources and kind of one neck to grab. But, there's plenty of room in the marketplace for what we're offering, and we're seeing a lot of interest in it.
What did you, again, kind of preparing to have these conversations, what did you maybe misunderstand that now you have a better understanding of?
I think the biggest thing is always, I think, getting the client that we're talking, the prospect that we're talking with, to actually reveal the things they're trying to solve for, that they have some visibility and knowledge of and understanding, but oftentimes they can't express it. So, our kind of approach to pulling that out of them, or extracting it, or laying it out, it's something we've refined over time, and we have different methodologies for different prospects. So one methodology is actually a workshop where we do kind of rapid framing to get the initial scaffolding out in the open, and a lot of times what it uncovers is the misalignment by department internally. Sales and marketing is often misaligned.
Yeah.
Product teams are misaligned. They have different motives and different kind of methodologies. Interestingly, one of the questions we ask clients all the time is, when was the last time you updated your analytics environment? And most clients are like, well, we constantly do. I'm like, well, but what's that mean? That's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it, right? Have you actually stepped back and like really looked at, well, it's been like probably since GA4 came out.
Yeah.
Okay. So the data you're relying on to make decisions is 4 years old, like the
Yeah.
framework for it. Okay, so let's start there. Let's get that. Let's make sure that we have the customer journey mapped out and all the touch points tracked in a way that's actionable, because I bet you've got gaps in that system. And step one is to get that super clear so that we're actually making decisions based on facts as opposed to potentially inaccuracies. So that's oftentimes one of those things. But that's, again, the client might actually be talking to us because they're concerned about, AEO, and so one of the things I tell the team, and this is actually something I learned in the Ogilvy system and training folks, is, we as account folks inside agencies and marketing services company need to lead clients.
Yes.
Lead them through our expertise with empathy and understanding, but we need to lead them. We don't need to serve them, right? So, and what's that mean? Clients ask the wrong question or an imprecise question all the time. We recently got a call from a client saying, I'm looking for an agency that will redo our website. And we basically just want to do an update and change the content and modernize our CMS, because our team right now, we're on an outdated CMS. And I'm like, okay, so I understand it's outdated. So that's an accurate statement. Redoing it with the same basic functionality and approach to the market is illogical,
Yeah.
because people are learning most of their initial information from the public LLMs and then showing up on your site at a later stage in the journey.
Yeah.
So you need to think about that, and you need to be prepared to adjust that over time as that gets even more the case. And your content strategy should be about offsite development of that and nurture of that relationship and consideration in a way that you haven't really been doing it.
Yeah.
So the ask was, I want a website. The problem was they weren't understanding the customer journey and the evolution, the way that consumers are actually relating to brands these days. And so by reframing it, yes, you needed a website, but you needed to do different things. So that, again, that's an example of leadership from the agency perspective. And I think a lot of times agencies get stuck in the trough of productizing things and selling widgets. And what you need to be selling is outputs and impact,
Yeah.
and calibrating that for how it fits in the whole ecosystem, not just as a one-off, because there's nothing that's a one-off. Everything has attachment to something else in the ecosystem that you need to be thinking about.
Yes. Which makes it really difficult to manage on your own. I work with a lot of smaller businesses and I have this conversation a lot and getting past the hurdle of what was maybe the case 5 years ago, just like you said, that's their frame of mind or frame of reference. In terms of what is important, one of the hypotheses I have is that the website will actually become less and less important over time as these exterior channels are used more often and people make decisions faster. That being said, how would you approach a smaller business with tips or ways to kind of retrain their thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of websites is you can cover, the full spectrum of experiences. I mean, they started off as brochureware, which was awful, but it was something, right? And then they started being e-com centers or very carefully curated kind of experiences in some respects, the ones that got it right. For small businesses, I think it's really important to have a website to demonstrate your belief system and your values and your personality and your culture. I mean, that's what people buy. They don't buy products and services; they buy a belief system and a brand. Even in small businesses, even in commodity categories, when you buy pizza, you're buying the energy of the way the place feels until you taste it. And then you're buying taste and experience. So I do think the websites will always play a role. And the nice thing is you can create an experience for those that are finding you first there, or those that have a lot of information or wanting to go further in the journey to deeper space. And you can deep link them into the site, and you can do that very easily these days. The ability to build sites has never been easier. But I think, less is more. Getting it right from a culture and belief system perspective is more important than having every speed and feed detailed out and have, like, consider it a first and second date, not a third and fourth and fifth in marriage. Unless you're selling direct, then of course you do need to go that full mile. But I think that websites play a really crucial role, and it's important to also monitor, for any business, to monitor who's showing up and what experiences they are having, using tools like Hotjar and other, kind of monitoring tools to understand what's that user experience perspective. If you always, in any channel, put the customer first and consider what they're seeking, and are you meeting their needs, and are they giving you clues of things you can improve, that's the really important stuff. And, with AEO and GEO kind of playing a bigger role these days, a website also is a source of information for them. So even though the customer may not show up at your website, you're training the public LLMs with the content that's on your site, because content does that, right? That sees the content in a very clear way. And having your LLM.text context on your website be very instructive is very important. And so, regardless of what you do, uh, it's important, I think, to have a website. Just as will always be the case, things change. So you need to stay in, update with what the changes are.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit, Chris, and kind of move into another pillar that I think a lot of businesses at any stage are constantly trying to evolve in, and that is the approach to business development and sales. And sales and marketing, like you mentioned earlier, are oftentimes fractionalized within a company and operating at different goals. What is your approach to business development, and what things work best to merge those two departments together?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two questions in there in my mind. One is how we help clients bridge the gap, and then how do we do it internally? So I'll touch on us first. We have a very thoughtful and organized and methodical business development approach. We have a podcast and a content series. Content is everything today. We do the same thing for our clients. Why would we not do it for ourselves? Obviously, the way we do it and the messaging and the content of it is different because we're doing different things and trying to attract different decision makers. But the belief system of like how do you create content that's high value is essential. So that's a key part of it. We have an outbound email program that works exceedingly well because we understand the pain points of the people that are on the other side, and by appealing to them with those things, it's about hitting them at the right time with the right message and asking for an opportunity to talk about it. So we have an outbounding methodology that works exceedingly well. Again, we do the same thing for our clients. Why would we not do it for ourselves? We know it works, right? Being the agency says, "Oh, you should do these things for your brand to really be successful." Well, why don't you do them for yours? Well, they're expensive. Well, wait, which one is it? Is it expensive for me too? Yeah, it's expensive. So we never want to be one of the agencies that is in a glass house that faces those kind of questions. So that's kind of generally how we do it. We have a workshop methodology where we bring the functional departments together and lay out the customer's perspective and get them to validate their agreement and understanding of that perspective. And in doing so, it's interesting how it shows the weak points in their belief system or the alignment around what they're actually doing to support customers. We get asked all the time, help us improve our lower funnel metrics because we're seeing softness. Our lower funnel isn't working. SEO is not working. And none of this is working the way it used to. And that's true. The first question we ask is, what are you doing to monitor customer experience and customer satisfaction? And if they have a simple answer of either nothing or we do CSAT, but what do you do with it and how are you activating that? Because if you can figure out how to make happy customers and really honor them as the most important asset in your company, then it'll fix that lower funnel stuff. If you've
Yeah.
got a viable business. I mean, there are some that, it's not fixable because you got a terrible business idea, but in most cases, you can create a culture and belief system that people will find appealing. Even if you have a commodity product, it might even be higher price. And we see that all the time. I mean, Tiffany's, it's a diamond, it's a piece of carbon, right? But if it's in a teal box, it's worth a lot, right? And the emotional impact is incredible. So, the ability to create that belief system and to be really honoring the intelligence and values of the customer is priority number one. So guiding customers to that through either workshops or other methodologies is definitely what we do. And that brings together the team. It may not solve it because we're talking about humans and longstanding kind of separation of church and state in the way they think and do a lot of times, but at least it exposes the vulnerabilities and the weak points. And with that, marketing can adapt and adopt methodologies and approaches that kind of minimizes that impact.
Yeah. And those workshops, are you doing that as an introduction, as a part of
It
earning the client's trust, or is that once they've already established an agreement with you?
We never do them free because nothing worth anything is free and people don't value it if you give it away. But sometimes it's the beginning of the relationship, sometimes it's quarterly. It just depends on the organization. We often get actually asked by private equity to bring together companies they've acquired, either multiple companies in a category or single companies to help them diagnose what they're doing. And frankly, oftentimes for PE, it's how do you get them to understand what the motive of the buyer is, the PE buyer? How do you translate PE to them? Because a lot of times they're used to running as a private company or a public company, and those are very different methodologies, and the way you do that are very, very, you need to align, or you'll be thrown out. And there's no reason for that because they're probably doing a decent job. I mean, you bought something of value, like let's just improve it, not throw it out.
Yeah. Chris, kind of shifting gears once again and talking about the other three largest, I guess, of a stool that I hear pieces of businesses really struggling with today, which is hiring and team building. And essentially the work that you're doing is creating that culture. You've built this huge partnership network. So you are, spearheading a lot of different cultures and integrating them as your own. But what did you get wrong about hiring early on that you have changed today?
Well, I think, back in the day, hiring was, let's build a full integrated team, So I think that the key for us, I mean, I feel like, you mentioned 35 years. It's actually probably a little more than that. I'm old. So with age comes experience. And if you're paying attention, you learn as you go. I've gotten a lot better at hiring, so it's less about the resume and what they have done. It's more about what they can do and what they want to do. So that's a big focus of the way I look at it. I have 3 things I look at. I want somebody that's insanely curious, because if you're not curious, you're not gonna, like, lean in. I want somebody that's got a unique personality, because the more that we have uniqueness in individuals in the group versus a homogeneous group, the more we're gonna have flavor and texture that comes out naturally and authentically. And then, I want people that understand that this is a business intended to make money for us and our clients. And they need to be comfortable asking for, big numbers. If you can't ask for, a salary or a raise, or you ask a client for a new scope, then you can't be in this business, because that's essential. You have to understand that this is about delivering value to get paid well. So those are kind of the things that we tend to really carefully think about. Where as a group, we have unlimited PTO, and people, take what they need, and we don't have to, like, babysit people. We operate in kind of typical hours, but if somebody's not around, they just have to mark their calendar that they're not around. We make it easy for people to be their best when they're present, and to be their best selves when they're not working, doing what they care about. And so we allow that latitude, in fact, encourage it and almost demand it, so that people are their best selves when they're, putting in time working for our clients. So we tend to think a lot about, like, how do we allow for the uniquenesses of everybody on the team to kind of thrive, versus, everybody has to be kind of 9 to 5, plugged in and logged in and on Slack and response in 5 minutes and all that kind of craziness. I've never met anybody that was better at delivering value because of working in a regimented and highly structured system. In fact, quite the opposite. The best and brightest minds I've ever worked with, you almost didn't know what they were working on until their brilliance showed up. And then it was like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the secret sauce, is, like, how do you allow people their room to be their best self, and create an environment where they can be. And it's not about level, title, or any of that. It's really about just creating a spirit of, bring your best when you're in it, bring your best and show up. And it works for us.
As work models start to change, do you think that that's almost going to be a given, especially as it pertains to a younger workforce? They sort of grew up with the ability to have flexibility. And do you think that that's something that your clients are finally coming to grips with, or is that even a thing that we need to be concerned about?
Well, I think, we're going to be our culture regardless. And part of what we represent to clients very transparently at the beginning is what is our culture? How do we operate? How can you count on us? What's the escalation path if you need help and you're not getting it, or you need to do something urgently? But we're also very clear that if somebody's on vacation, they're on vacation. This is just because something's falling apart in your world. We'll do our best to help you, but we're not going to drop everything. We're not surgeons. We're not saving lives. This is not an emergency. And yet we treat it as an emergency with respect to the people involved. So, I hope that organizations start to adopt a more flexible and open model. It's going to be a slow path, because there's this whole return to office movement. I find it absurd. The number of people that go to office and do Zoom meetings, it's just like, come on. Like, I want that time back of transportation back and forth, and the cost and the impact of the environment. Like, what I really want is a heart and mind to show up when it's present and when we agree to meet. And I do think that there's tremendous value spending time together in person. So don't mistake it for that. But creating a context for that that's high value and high reward for everybody is essential. I do think that having offices is appropriate for certain businesses and certain organizations. We don't have one because we're 100% remote. But that's not to say that an office is a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if it's about a regimented approach and not bringing out the best of people. And I think that's where there's still much learning to be had. And there's lots of different shapes and forms that it'll eventually take over time.
Yeah. Do you what's coming to mind as you're sharing this information is the type of leader that you are, and I'm curious, the types of companies that you work with. I'm sure leadership, as you said, it's your role to really lead and guide them in this particular process. But what has this work taught you to not only be a better leader in your own business, but to help demonstrate or model leadership to the businesses that you work with?
I mean, it's pretty simple. I think in the end, we like actually, I just spoke with a college student that's graduating this year, and she was super curious about like what should I do when I consider like where to work, and it's so hard right now, and I'm just really scared. And I said, your fear is justified because it's tough, but you should look for the right cultural fit first and foremost. And I said, look, do the research, get to like snoop the people, be like an investigative reporter, figure out, is it a place that is going to meet your needs? And you're not going to know until you go try it on, but like have that thought through very, very carefully up front. And if it's an organization that does have an in office 3 days a week or something like that, like figure out, do they have like sports clubs that do they have like volleyball and softball, like team groups that they get together with? Do they have a company bar or hangout spot? What's their culture?
Yeah.
Because you will learn so much more from a place, and you'll feel so much more connected from a place that has a culture that fits your personality. I mean, is it a free for all and very disorganized, and therefore that kind of madness, you have to have that personality? Or is it very structured and classic, and that might be your jam? Like that, but look through that lens. And so, as a leader for our organization, I think about it through the lens of like, I first and foremost care about our team members more as people than employees in the job they do. I can get somebody to do the job. Like that's in some ways the easy part. What's the hard part is finding people that I want to spend time with, that I know have my back and our team's back, and are going to like fight for doing great work, doing the best work of their lives together. And that there's no BS, no like, no, excuse my French, but no assholes. You can't have that. That's a cancer that eats you alive.
Yeah.
And, if you're not going to be a team player, then you need to go play somebody else, somewhere else. So those are, I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. We also don't operate like a family. You know, I was talking with somebody recently, and they're like, our agency is like a family. I'm like, whew, good Lord, families are messy. Like, I don't know about your family,
Sure.
but, families are messy. Instead, what we operate like is a community with role distribution. There's a superintendent of schools that's really good at their job. There's a chief of police. There's a head of the judiciary. There's a head of, the
Yeah.
mayor, and we, it's not a democratic process entirely. By dividing and conquering, and having role separation that's clear and understood, and being there to support each other through kind of the ups and downs of things is essential. And then, just having radical transparency about things like these agencies where there's no transparency around the financials of the company or that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like, don't work at those places, because inevitably you're just a cog and not a part of the core of the belief system of the place.
Yeah. I love that you shared that. I've never heard that perspective that, we also don't operate like a family instead rather than a community and everyone has a role. Love that. When you started, when this started taking shape for you, who's the leader in your life that comes to mind that helped bring that perspective to you?
Well, I've had lots of, people that have influenced me in many, many really interesting ways. I mean, I'm the byproduct of a therapist father and an educator mother. So, you combine those together and you're going to be in marketing. Like the odds are like 80% or better that you're going to be in marketing if you get lucky enough to find the path. But I also think that my parents brought a realism and pragmatism to the case, so I see it for what it is. Growing up in Ogilvy was great. I've worked in Omnicom and Publicis and some smaller independents, and I've got great lessons from all of them. I mean, there's if you're I'm a student of life and of people, and so I've learned valuable lessons, good and bad, from people along my way. at every stop in every way. The saying of trust but verify is something that, when you're bigger companies, you often have to really be careful about, because the layers create complexity that you often can't see. And you can't tell everybody everything in a big organization. And so, I think that's kind of a dimension of it. I've had, a great journey, and the opportunity to lead lots of people that have taught me a lot, because if you're a good leader, you're really paying attention to, I don't like the term servant leader, because I think that's a misrepresentation of the reality. The spirit of it, of serving people in the way that you would want to be served, is kind of the way I look at that, and I definitely do that. And the team would, definitely reflect on that. If you ask anybody that's either worked with me in the past or currently, is that, as a leader, I obsess around over communication and transparency. Why? Because that's what I want. I want
Yeah.
that from people. So I can't ask somebody to do something I'm not going to do.
Yeah. What values drive how you serve people?
Pretty simple. Again, I mean, I think it's trust, transparency, honoring people's intelligence, knowing that we're all flawed and make mistakes, and making mistakes is a part of success. You have to fail fast and fail cheap, to learn and grow. Just, it's pretty simple stuff. I mean, there's no like calculus to it. I mean, treat people like you want to be treated. But don't do it like, David Ogilvy has a great saying, don't do anything you wouldn't want your mom to know about. Like, it's a simple principle, right?
Yeah. That's a good mantra to live your life by.
Indeed.
What are what are your best clients? The types of businesses that are a really great fit for what you do. What do those things have in common?
Typically, it's an organization that is pretty well run and really challenges us to be our best. We're most energized by highly compelling, vulnerable partners. So we look for brands that are going to be really transparent and open with us, and comfortable being vulnerable and exposing what they don't know. I mean, for example, one of the senior marketers that I work with, it's not uncommon for her to reach out and say, I just want to chat about some things. And we'll talk about how she's feeling about the challenges between her and the leadership team. And, she's able to be very vulnerable about that stuff. And to the point where, we even had conversations, as one example, with one client I've talked with. I said, look, you should look for a job. You know, you should look for a job. And it's hard for me to say that to a client that's on our roster, you should
Yeah.
look for a job. But honestly, again, I care about people more than the job or the client relationship. I mean, if I do right by people, it'll always pay off in the end, and I can live with myself. I can go to sleep every night knowing I've done the best I could for the people that are around me. And so the best clients are, looking for that, not just a commodity relationship where it's, servile, and they kind of, treat you poorly, and that we just don't have any time for that.
Yeah. When you're identifying those businesses, how do you like, what's your frame of reference for finding them?
Well, I think intrinsically most clients have that within them, but they have to learn how to do it a lot of times, because most of the agency relationships they've had or have experienced don't relate to them in that same way. So we have an onboarding process that kind of begins that and establishes that framework, because you can't expect people to know you and the way you work unless you kind of are vulnerable and exposing it to them. And so we do that as part of the sales process, so it's not a shock when we get married, right? We're very clear about our methodology and our culture and our belief system. And, in our base capabilities deck, we have a slide that says what to expect from Model B. And one of the tenets is, we have to be comfortable having hard conversations together, and expect us to challenge you, not because we'll argue about ideas to the end. We'll never argue about a person.
Yeah.
And that's like a very clear framing. And a lot of times people stop on that and they're like, what do you mean? Well, a lot of times you get frustrated with somebody in this role and you start to personalize the issue instead of saying, that person's an analytics person. How can we dig into what we want the analytics insights to be and make it about the issue, not the person?
Yeah.
And if the person is not culturally, because sometimes we do have personality conflicts, right? And it's part of the beauty of our model is, if you're not working with somebody on our team successfully, let's change that. Like, life's too short. Like, there's lots of different times where relationships have been ruined over one or two people that didn't vibe. And so we're very comfortable changing. I've been fired from client relationships in the past. And, while I didn't like it, in the end, it was like, thank God I don't have to interact with those people. We just did not click. And
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, think
Yeah.
about it. Like, that's human nature. And
Yeah.
so, is that a bad thing? No, it's only a bad thing if you don't pay attention to it. So we're very aware of that and quick to proactively deal with it.
Yeah, I love that you've made that as a part of the onboarding as opposed to dealing with it, from a
Yep.
reactive place. That's
Yep.
amazing. So okay, I wanna move forward. What does the future look like for Model B? What things are you most excited about right now?
Well, I mean, we're excited about kind of continuing to help clients scale and deliver value. We call ourselves a growth marketing consultancy because that's what we do, right? We deliver growth and impact. Our clients tend to cluster in finance, healthcare, tech, and nonprofits, but we're category agnostic. Honestly, we just want the variety of which we see as the spice of life. We wouldn't want to be a specialist in one vertical because our brains get more energy and excitement from working across lots of different spaces and verticals. And so the thing that we're most excited about is continuing to build with our clients and frankly, being very much a student of what's happening next without always chasing the bleeding edge, but being really responsible about leading clients into the future. To me, that's our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to each other as a team.
Yeah. Kind of goes without saying, and I'm sure you are asking on your podcast as we are as well, when it comes to AI and how you are leading clients through that, whether that be education or, integration. What are your thoughts around that?
We love AI. We use it constantly. It's a integral part of our lives. It's a tool. It's a set of tools. It will never replace human interaction, the value that we bring as humans. What it is doing, and this is something we're very careful about, is it's giving us the ability to accelerate our our time and focus on the things that truly matter. So a lot of the menial stuff, the base research, the base analysis, the base kind of workflow processing, we can automate and it takes so much of the noise out of the business with stability that frankly humans couldn't even deliver, right? I mean, it can normalize data in no time with accuracy that no human could. Like, just period, right? Because we're flawed. Transcribing numbers, like, you make one mistake and the whole thing falls apart. Whereas the AI is going to be, binary in it. And so, but then once you've got those numbers is what you do with it. So an example of that, one of the things we're very excited about is we've just started working with a tool that looks at the social graph. Like, what are the emerging ideas in on the rise in culture that a brand can affiliate with? And the AI gives us the ability to see these things with a precision and time to value that we previously had to rely on so many other sources and dig hours and weeks and spend all this time. Now, we still do some of that because there's still going to be things that it won't find. We're also very careful not to get lost in the tools because I think that's a big part of the problem is that with the pace of leapfrogging productivity tool set wise, we're very careful to use, like, we're a member of the AI Marketers Guild, and that's a place where you can get the tools that are proven to work because other people are using them and they're very clear about how, and you can ask them questions and make sure.
Yeah.
So that the ability to vet and focus on the things that matter is definitely something that we focus on and are able to do. And we do that for ourselves, but also for our clients. And, this is not about automating jobs away and eliminating human interactions. It's always human in the loop.
Mhm. In order for you to grow, I'm curious, what are you currently saying no to?
Well, we say no to people that just want us to be a commodity kind of manufacturing shop, that want to tell us what to do, because we're very specialized at what we do, and we want partners that want to allow us to help them because of the strengths and unique abilities that we have. What we don't want to be is a commodity shop that's just doing what told. There's plenty of shops that'll do that. 100,000 agencies in the US, like, pick one, lots of them will do that. We choose by default not to do that. We won't work with ogres or clients that treat you as a vendor. We want partners, and words aside, we can be a vendor as long as we treat each other with respect and value each other and the contributions we can make. And we only want clients that want to be incredibly successful. We don't want clients that just want to, kind of do the baseline and hide from the potential of what they could be doing.
Well, in as it pertains to that, how do you say no when you find a client that's not a fit?
Straight up, thanks for your time. Really enjoyed getting to know you. One of the hardest decisions in making decisions is knowing when there's a good fit, and we don't feel like this is. I know that there's going to be somebody that's a better fit. In fact, sometimes we'll even refer them to somebody that we think is a better fit. I mean, same thing with somebody that we have on the team. If we ever have somebody on the team that isn't a fit over time, we owe it to them to tell them, like, straight up. You know, Long story I'll make very short. I had an employee at a previous agency that worked for me that was the wife of one of our largest clients. And I had to fire her because she was terrible at her job. And so I said to her, I won't use her name, but I said to her, hey, you're in the wrong role and you're in the wrong place. And so today's your last day. Internalize that for a second, because I know that's a lot and it feels bad. And I have empathy for you on that level. However, here's what I think you're really good at. And I would suggest strongly that you go and try and find a place that allows you to do what you're really, like, wired to do and would do exceedingly well. And she, of course, was emotional and couldn't really internalize it at the moment. I called her husband and said, hey, I want you to know we just had a separation with your wife. If that's a problem, I get it. I hope it's not. I want you to understand why. I'm happy to come and talk to you in depth about it. I'm happy to talk to you and your wife together if that's helpful. We value your business and continue to be focused on delivering value. But if you can't see past that, then I get it. He said, well, I appreciate you telling me. It's definitely going to be a hard night at home tonight. We did continue with the client. 6
Wow.
months later, I got a bouquet of flowers in my office from her saying, you were right. She
Oh
went
my goodness.
off and changed focus of her career to a role that I had suggested or similar to that. And she was super happy and really thriving. Now, I don't consider myself like, a sage that can see the future, right? But I do feel like anytime I've ever had that conversation, whereas the few times I've been let go, it was usually financial reasons for the company. They were going through the ups and downs that agencies do. And people were just like contrite about it and, going through the paperwork, and people aren't good at it. Right. And I don't
Yeah.
want to be good at it, but I want to be good to people. So, and being good to people, whether it be a client or a prospect, firing a client or firing a team member, you owe it to them to tell them why. And we try and tell them why. And here's a better alternative here, unless they're just complete nutbags. And then, you know, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
We wish you well. And that's enough.
I think that's an amazing story to leave people with. Again, it kind of goes back to treating others how you would want to be treated if you were in that situation.
Indeed.
So amazing. So a couple of quick questions. I want to be mindful of your time, and I appreciate all that you've shared. This is kind of a hypothetical scenario. We always end on this, but let's just say you've created everything that you want to create through Model B, personally, financially, and for, this e- entity keeps living on beyond you. You've created legacy, but you don't get to take any of the lessons necessarily that people could see to learn from you with you when you're gone for whatever reason, that you have to turn that all in, let's just say. But what you do get to leave behind is three pieces of advice or three lessons, about anything that you would share to a business owner that is looking to create a successful business that is lasting. What would your lessons to them be?
Always do your best to look around the corner and see what's there. So plan obsessively and look to the future so that you're not falling behind. Try and make a positive dent in the universe. And the way we express that is one of our tenets and belief systems, which I hope would be continued, is, do good for all. There's no reason why you can't, in any business with intention, try and do things that are good for all. Businesses that try and take advantage of consumers and win them through promotional kind of tricks or ways of conning them into buying from you are a recipe for disaster. And I think that if you do good for all, you'll always win long term. And it's enduring growth that's important. And frankly, the ability to go to sleep at night, if you've done good for all, you know, everybody wins. And then, treat everybody the way you want to be treated, and you'll always come out ahead. I think that's a simple thing that's definitely a part of our ethos. And I think those lessons can apply to any business, and it addresses a lot of the vulnerabilities and failure points for most businesses. So those would be the three I would focus on.
So I want to acknowledge you for everything that you've built and again what you've shared. I think you make some very powerful points about, developing starting with the culture, but really it's your own personal identity that you've sounds to me that you've built this business around. So thank you for being that example to others and for sharing, your words of wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Kimberly.
All right. Appreciate you. Everyone will be sure to link up Chris's information in our show notes so that you can contact. I'm sure he would take a contact on LinkedIn and happy to answer any questions that you have. And we'll link resources to Model B if you are interested in having conversations with him. So until next time, we thank you for tuning in and see you on our next conversation.